Why the switch from titanium back to aluminum? Why is there a price hike on the base and the plus and not the ultra? Silicon carbon batteries. They've been out for a couple of years now, and it does allow you technically to get you more capacity in the same size frame, but I'm just curious why you passed on it this time. The S25 Edge made a big splash last year. Can you say anything about whether or not we're going to see a follow-up or not? The Galaxy S26 has officially launched, and today we have a very special guest in Samsung's Drew Blackard, who's going to walk through the new Samsung flagships, as well as break down all of the new features, including the privacy display on the S26 Ultra, as well as the Agentic AI features across the lineup. So let's get into it. And there's lots of people who are coming from older phones. People are holding on to their phones longer. So in your mind, if you were like pitching this phone out to someone, what would you say would be like the 3 upgrades or 3 features, like wow features that would compel someone to upgrade?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you think about the traditional consumer, I think they're always thinking, screen, camera, battery. Those are like the traditional ways that consumers think about it. And I would say we've packed a ton of innovation, across the board. I think, from the camera perspective, the Ultra has a wider aperture on both the telephoto and the wide angle lens. So that means more light can come into the system. It's better with low light photography. That's in addition to what we're doing on the processing side for noise reduction using AI technology and things like that. So the camera performance is incredible. And that includes the selfie camera, which for the first time is using our AI ISP. That's the image signal processor. So it's actually getting a lot of the hardware capability that the rear cameras usually exclusively get on the selfie camera as well. So amazing, incredible innovation there. And then from the display perspective, today we announced the world's first privacy display, which is really incredible if you've had a chance to take it hands-on yet. But it's basically, you can kind of think of it like a traditional privacy film display that you have to kind of, put on one time. And if you pull it off, you've got to go buy a new one, where you can actually not only trigger it, whenever you need it. So say you're, maybe on the subway or waiting in line, at a quick order restaurant or something, you feel like people around you might be looking at your screen. All you have to do is press a button and it turns into a privacy display. And
Right.
the amazing part about this is that, that's one use cases where you can actually trigger it, but it's actually smart enough to understand where you can set apps that you want to go in. So if your banking application, if you always want that to, be private, you can have that by default. In addition, anytime you're entering a password or a PIN code on the screen, it'll know that you're entering sensitive information and be able to pull up the privacy mode. And maybe even the coolest is because it's at a pixel level, it can do portions of the screen. So if you imagine you're, looking at the browser, just reading an update and a text message notification comes in at the top, you can have it just block out the text message notification. So it really takes, kind of privacy to a whole new level in terms of the hardware element of privacy. And then I would say the last thing is just the amount of innovation we're now doing on the AI front, which I think every year we've seen more and more that creep up in terms of purchase driver and table stakes for what people expect out of their device. And so this year we've got some incredible new features, I think, ranging from the more creative side. We have Creative Studio that allows you to basically do a range of different editing on photos using either just text input. It's actually truly multimodal. So you can draw something onto the photo and it can create an image. If I wanted to add like a birthday hat on a picture, of a person, you can add that on, just drawing it on. You can do text. So you can type it to, merge these things two together, or you can actually give it an image. So you can say, I'd like to see what I look like in this outfit. And it can actually take the clothes from one picture and put it over on another. So a lot of powerful AI features as well. So the way I think about it, it has those traditional reasons to upgrade, in terms of the screen and the camera as big leaps year over year, as well as some of these new cutting edge AI use cases.
So one of the things that struck me about the S26 Ultra in terms of the design is that it's a lot closer to the rest of the lineup. And I feel like that's, to me, it's almost like pros and cons, because on the one hand, like almost want to scream to the world that you have the most expensive Ultra on you at all times, if you're a little bit of a phone snob like me. But
Right.
on the other hand, I know that you guys are trying to unify the design across the lineup. So can you just walk us through sort of that unification decision in terms of the look and feel?
Yeah, I think it's mainly that. I mean, consumers want a more, the most streamlined devices possible. So actually being able to, refine the design overall, and particularly kind of I think you're referring to kind of the tapering around the corners where it's more rounded out than it's been before. It's just kind of like a refined new experience overall. And to your point, ultimately we want to have a family look overall. So whether you're using the base model, the plus model, or the ultra, that year stands out. And so of course, I think it's an interesting point on kind of wanting, the ultra to stand out. I think in and of itself, just by the cameras itself and things like that, it'll probably allow it to differentiate. But overall, I think it was more just streamline the family together so that the family can have a distinct look together.
And in terms of materials, why the switch from titanium back to aluminum for the
Yeah,
Ultra?
I mean, these are always just trade-offs that we continually looking at on kind of, weight versus strength and things like that. And so, every generation, and as you know, we launch a lot of models in addition to Galaxy S in terms of foldables and A series models. So we're always looking at design materials and trying to optimize there. And I think ultimately, each generation we're weighing that balance of durability versus weight and what's right for the consumer needs.
Okay. And in terms of privacy display, I have some questions around that. I think there's a lot of
Sure.
people who assumed going into the launch that it was basically a screen protector you put on top. And obviously, it's a much more sophisticated than that. When we're talking about the pixel level with narrow, I guess, narrow pixels and wide pixels. Can you just talk a little bit about how that works?
Sure. Yeah. So if you think about it, like as you mentioned, that a typical display, if you were to kind of zoom in very close, like you have individual pixels that
Mhm.
kind of power each display, and traditionally, each of those pixels has what we'd call like kind of a wide angle, where the light emitting from those looks something like this, kind of a V shape.
Mhm.
And what that allows you to do is have great brightness, great color. What we're able to do is each pixel, if you think about it, every other one is a narrow pixel versus a wide pixel. And what those narrow pixels do is, as opposed to being maybe a wide V, it's more of kind of like a, not quite parallel, but it's able to kind of block out. So there's less, angles of light emitting. And so it's more direct, light that you have. And so with that, I think the power of that's probably twofold. One is you're able to toggle it on and off. To your point, it's not just a accessory that you put on and off. It's driven by the hardware, but implemented with software. So again, from the quick panel that you pull down from the top of the menu, you can actually set it as a double click command
Mhm.
with your with your power key. So if you're just on a screen and you quickly want to, get it in privacy mode, you just can double click, power key as an example.
Right.
So it gives you that flexibility of kind of whenever you want to turn it on, you can turn it on. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's intelligent to know when you're entering sensitive information like a password or a PIN code. So it can automatically pull it up at those times. And then again, because it's also at that pixel level, as I mentioned, um, what you're able to then do with that is block out certain portions of the screen. So again, if you have like notifications that are coming in, and
Mhm.
it's not that uncommon for people to want to quickly swipe away a notification because it's maybe you're there at work and it's a personal note coming in, then only you will be able to see that, but the rest of the screen is visible to everyone else. So by
Yeah.
implementing it at the pixel level, you're able to have all this flexibility that allows you to really personalize it to your experience.
So what about, I mean, if there are trade-offs, maybe we can talk about that. So let's say the brightness of the display itself, whether it's on or off, is there a trade-off in terms of nits, in terms of brightness, whether you're indoors or out?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd have to, we can get you like the nits of what it is when it's in privacy mode. But, the brightness will go down, but the key element is actually more of that, um, side angle view. So, as it goes from a straight on angle to a side angle, the person looking at it straight can see it easily, and then as soon as you're an angle off of that, it's very very hard to make out what's on the screen. And so it's really more about the angle of viewing. Of course, if you're wanting to watch a video or play a game or something like that, you're not going to want to be in the privacy screen mode. It's more for those scenarios where you're you can imagine anywhere from banking to messaging to other personal things that you're doing in public settings where, you want that to be for your eyes only.
And what about when the privacy display is off? Is there any trade-offs in terms of brightness or viewing angles? Because I've seen like just a couple of video hands-on so far, and it looks like there is a difference versus the S25 Ultra, but I don't know how much. But What do you know at this stage?
Yeah. I mean, the users aren't going to be able to tell a difference. It's an amazing display, and of course, Samsung being kind of a global leader in displays, we wouldn't sacrifice the primary, visual experience if there was any downsides to that. So I can say with confidence that people will have an amazing experience with it off and have that added flexibility when it's on.
Okay. In terms of AI, I think the one term that we kept hearing over and over again during Unpacked was agentic AI, right? And I think people in the industry know what that means, but for the everyday user, like what's the benefit for them, and what are some examples of like AI just getting stuff done on your behalf?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, yeah, to your point, in the industry, it's probably a topic or that's discussed a lot, and people have a good understanding of what agentic AI might mean in that case. But for people who are less familiar with that, they might think of it as only kind of a chat based interface where they're you know you know uh, asking for Gemini to do something or something like that. We think of it more broadly as that, and I would say in the industry context, I would say that's kind of how it's understood, is that an agent or agentic could mean really anything that the device is doing on your behalf as a user. So it can include these, traditional agent type of application basis, but it can also at an OS level take information and context and act on that on your behalf to kind of make your life easier, more efficient, etc. So examples of that, like that one of the ones that we talked about in Unpack today is a feature called Now Nudge, and this is kind of a riff on last year we had Now Brief and Now Bar, which was the start of this, which is okay, if my device knows that there's certain sports teams that I like to watch, or that I have an upcoming appointment at a certain time, or that I might be traveling to a certain location, it can actually kind of push to me relevant information as that information is coming up. And so Now Nudge kind of takes that even further. So within messaging applications, it can actually understand the context of the conversation that I'm having, and then quickly provide me some shortcuts to quickly provide information back. So examples of that could be if you texted me, "Hey, are you free for dinner tonight?" Um, at say 7 p.m., as opposed to me having to leave the app, go look at my calendar, find the day, and see if I'm free. It can immediately look in the calendar for me and pull up, availability, or tap to the calendar, and you can immediately see availability and go in. Same for
Right.
sharing photos and things like that. It says like, "Hey, do you have a picture of when we were in California last summer?" Something like that. It could actually look at last summer and California and quickly serve those up to you just with kind of a press of a button. So these are all things, again, like I think that agentic theme, as you mentioned it, is allowing the user to get more done faster without really having to think about how to do it. And I think maybe the coolest example of that, or the most innovative example, is the one that we partnered on with Google, that Samir talked about at the event, which is basically app automation, where it takes it to that next level of, let's say we decide to have that dinner tonight. My calendar will know that we have dinner coming up at 7, and so around 6:30 I could get an indicator saying, "Hey, would you like to book an Uber to this dinner location?" And all you'd have to do is say yes, and then it would start that process in the background where it can actually go through. It knows the context of what time you're needing to be there, where you're going, and then it can go about starting to book a ride for you. And you can then, check on that process and confirm that process. So those are all examples, again, of where it takes it beyond just the traditional way of I need to go into a specific application to do a certain thing.
Mhm.
And the device starting to understand more about your behaviors in the context of your situation, whether that's location or time based, or other things, and it can start to then take actions on your behalf.
And I know it's early, but I think you guys mentioned some other partners, like DoorDash, I think would be coming online, and maybe Grubhub. I'm not sure about Instacart, but is there like a full list of partners, or is it, you know,
Yeah, I mean, we'll get you a fuller, more complete list of partners, but I would say kind of the general themes are kind of like, transportation based and delivery based things where, at least early on, that's kind of our view of the most useful utility, where you're needing to kind of do something quickly on the go. So you're needing to, scramble to, to the airport or something like that, and you're pulling your bags together, and, can we book a car for you? Yes, you get going. And to your point on food delivery and things like that, it can really simplify the process.
I would just wonder like how specific you can get, and I don't know if you've been trying it out yourself, but could you say like, I want the barbecue burger from this restaurant? You know what I mean? Like how
Yeah.
specific can you get, or do we not know yet? Because it's still like in testing, right?
Yeah, it's still, as Samir mentioned, it's still kind of in, well, it's out of testing. It's kind of in more beta mode, right? Where it's out there, it's going to be available for people to use and provide feedback on. But then, to your point, we'll probably have to stress test how specific we can get in terms of like the substitutes for certain food things and things like that.
What happens if someone like orders something that they didn't mean to? Do they ask for a refund from Gemini or from like DoorDash? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you
Yeah,
anticipate?
so the way that it's set up today is that you would confirm the final order or the final ride detail. So it's basically in a future point, it could theoretically do that for you, but to avoid what you're talking about and build confidence early on of consumers, it'll kind of take all the information you said. Like the example today was a good example where it was like you've got 5 different orders from 5 different family members. It can kind of consolidate those, make the order, and then before ordering, it'll come back to you and say, "Mark, here's what we think your order is. Is this, you want to go ahead and confirm?" And then you'd go ahead and confirm.
Okay. Then just on the subject of AI, I think there's a lot of people who might be surprised that Bixby is not only around, but still very much kicking, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but you guys have decided to give it a very specific purpose, right? So I think maybe just first explain like why Gemini and Bixby still coexist on the phone and what
Sure.
actually makes them different.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the interesting data points that we've seen in terms of the research we've done is amongst active AI users, people who are already using AI, about 8 out of 10 use more than one agent to get things done.
Mhm.
I know I do. I would suppose you might even like in your profession, right? And you've kind of explored these different services, and so that's a very common thing where users are actually gravitating towards different services to accomplish different things. So of course, as you mentioned, we've had Gemini as a core partner of ours from the very beginning of kind of our foray into AI, starting with S24 series on through to today. Some of the announcements today even include Perplexity in terms of kind of deeper integration into Samsung Internet as well as Bixby as an example. And then Bixby itself, to your point, is we've been really trying to refine it in a purpose-built fashion, where as opposed to it in the past, in the kind of the early days of the service being just a traditional, voice kind of search service, now really focused on uh, enabling the Samsung ecosystem as well as kind of the on-device experience. And so what I mean by that is, a lot of the utility of it can be if you're, say, struggling with setting up a smart home for the first time and you have a Samsung TV and maybe smart things and different things like that, it can easily guide you through that process. Again, using natural language because it's now kind of an LLM based service as opposed to maybe a, kind of more traditional, search service. And so with that, it can guide users how to set up things like their smartphone or smart home. And it can also help them with their smartphone. So like if I think, oftentimes users are looking for certain settings, but they don't quite know exactly how to explain it. They might know how to naturally explain it, but they might not know what the feature is called, as an example. So let's think like blue light filter for your, if you read a lot on your smartphone.
Mhm.
You might not know that it's called a blue light filter or what exactly it's called in the settings, but you can say my eyes are, straining a little bit when I'm reading the screen. Can you help? And it'll
Sure.
actually pull up, it'll understand the context of what you're saying. It'll pull up, this is the feature that can help you, kind of manage that, your eye strain a little bit better. Would you like to turn it on? And it'll even include the toggle in the result. So it's not telling you, oh, to get there, go into settings and go under display and go under do this. It's just, here's it, toggle it on, yes or no. So
Yeah.
we're trying to integrate it throughout the device experience
Mhm.
to deliver these things to users such that it's much easier to kind of find and do things so that it takes a little bit of the friction out of, some of those deeper menus and setup, whether it's again on the device itself or, the broader ecosystem and smart home setup that you're looking for.
Cool. Just pivoting to pricing real quick, just because I think it was interesting. Like the S26 Ultra stays at the price as the S25 Ultra, but the regular model and the Plus are $100 more than their predecessors. Can you just talk about that in terms of, why is there a price hike on the base and the Plus and not the Ultra?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, we really haven't substantially moved price in, I think, since maybe 2021 or something like that. So it's been a while. We've been able to maintain prices for pretty long time. And at one point, Ultra actually went up without the others going up. And so I think every generation we have to look at a variety of different factors, and we've packed so much innovation year over year over year over year in terms of new custom processors every year, bigger batteries, better screen technology, improved camera technology, now a lot more AI. And we have to take all of these into consideration and still want to provide it as the most accessible price point for consumers as possible. So that's kind of how we landed on what we landed on. I think the thing we're excited about is, like, in partnering with our carrier partners, you'll see a lot of ultra on us type of offers in the market today, which is going to make kind of that premium technology accessible for as many consumers as possible. So yeah, it's really finding that right balance of making sure that we're providing the right experience overall, and then kind of figuring out the pricing based on that, and then of course working with our channel partners to make sure we make it as accessible as possible to as many consumers as possible.
Okay. And then for the camera upgrades around the S26 Ultra, it seems like the main highlight is just better low light performance, period, whether you're taking photos or nighttime video. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's fair to say, and I think I'll explain a little bit in detail that, because I think the whole family will actually benefit. So Ultra is the one that has the new sensors with wider aperture, and so that will have an immediate benefit of wider aperture is basically a bigger opening for the lens. More light can come in. More light means like less noise and better low light photos. But what all three devices have is a new capability, which is really cool within our AI ISP, the image signal processor, which is, and they explained it a little bit in Unpack, but I'll explain it a little bit more because it didn't go into extreme detail. But um, every sensor that gets made, every camera sensor has a unique noise, call it a fingerprint, right? It's different than every one that goes out the door. So if you have an S26 base model and I have an S26 base model,
Hmm.
the noise profile will be a little bit different.
Sure.
And so,
Okay.
to develop a noise filter, traditionally you can develop noise filters, but it's kind of lowest common denominator because you have to just assume what the broad range of outcomes might be. Um, kind of with AI at the ISP level, the device itself can actually learn that device's noise profile, which is
Mhm.
really interesting because then it can actually create a noise filter very specific to that noise profile. And that's across all three devices. So again, like, there's new lenses on the S26 Ultra, but all three models will benefit from this AI noise reduction capability, which will lead to much better low light photos and low light video. So as you know, I mean, we've really been driving low light photography for, gosh, I think the first time we started using the word nightography was like on S9 or S10, so we've really been every year continuing to push the envelope of what's possible there.
Just on the battery front, it looks like the capacities are around the same as the previous models, and I was just curious about your thoughts around silicon carbon batteries, just because they've been out for a couple of years now, but I do think that lots of companies are exploring them, and it does allow you technically to get you more capacity in the same size frame. But I'm just curious why you passed on it this time, or if you're still investigating it.
Yeah, I would say still investigating. We're always looking at new technologies and seeing what we can deliver. I mean, today I think we're, prioritizing battery life effectively, and we feel really strongly that all three devices will have more than all day battery life. And then, even in terms of some of the fast charging that we talked about at Unpacked, we'll have even faster charging times, which is really cool. So that's our priority for today, but we'll continue to investigate.
And last question for me was that what we didn't see today was an S26 Edge, and obviously the S25 Edge made a big splash last year. Can you say anything about whether or not we're going to see a follow-up or not?
Yeah, I would say, we're continuing to just look at what we want to do next. Obviously, last year we didn't launch it with the core lineup. It launched, I believe, in April last year. And to us, it was an important device in terms of really the design innovation that really you saw that really come full circle on the Fold 7 launch. We're really getting much slimmer and tighter. All of that said, it's still an in-market device that we have. So we've not end of life that device, and we're assessing when the right time to have a follow-up would be, but at this point nothing I can share to to confirm.
Cool. All right, well, I definitely appreciate the time, especially after a long day at Unpacked, and
Sure.
we look forward to checking out the device and doing our full review.
All right, great. Thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks guys, appreciate it. Thanks to Drew Blackard for taking his time right after the S26 launch to walk us through all of the new flagships, and make sure you subscribe to Tom's Guide to get our full review of the S26 Ultra as soon as we have it fully tested. For Tom's Guide, this is Mark Spoonhour.